everyone, today is Friday and it is going to be the start of my magical readathon. If you haven't checked out the video where I talk about exactly what this readathon is, I'll just go ahead and throw in that it was created by the channel Book Roast. This is her third year running it. It is so intense and intricate and detailed and really fun, and although the sorting, the finding of the books you're going to read through the month of April is Harry Potter themed and based, the books themselves do not have to be. And if you watch that video, then you know what books I have chosen and why. I'm going to begin that journey today. One of those books, the short Patrick Rothfuss one, I can only read once it gets dark, so I'm not going to touch that till later in the day, right before I go to bed. But right now, I'm going to go outside, hang out with my dogs, because it is such a beautiful day out, and I love reading outdoors when I can. So I'm trying to decide between A Court of Frost and Starlight or... what is this? One Dark Throne. I'm leaning towards One Dark Throne, even though my heart actually more wants to read the Sarah J. Maas book, partially because I love the series and partially because it's shorter, but I think that's the reason why I should go towards the thicker, probably a little bit longer book to get through, and then I can just rush through this one at the end rather than saving the longer one for later in the month. That's my plan, so that's what I think I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna go outside, I'm gonna start reading, and I'm super excited. I think this is gonna be really fun. Hello reading friends, today is Monday afternoon, and I'm continuing my magical readathon. And I actually spent a lot of last night and this beautiful sunshiny morning outside reading One Dark Throne. I am officially 100 pages in. I forgot how fast of a read this series is. I mean, I only read 3 Dark Crowns before it. Although the book might seem thick, just the way it's spaced and the way the chapters are, it's actually a very quick, engaging read. I think, at least from what I gather off of Goodreads and Bookstagram, this series is fairly, I don't want to say controversial, but divisive. There seems to be people who really like it, and then some people that just do not jive with it at all. I'm pretty sure it's written in a distant third-person perspective, which is unusual for YA writing, which tends to be either first or an extremely close third. So there's that, and then the story is just, it's a little bit slower, it's a little bit colder, it's a little bit more meticulous. I really like that aspect. I like the sisters, and I love Catherine. She's one of the 3 queen triplets, and while I like Marabella and Arsinoe plenty, but Catherine is the cool one. She seems to be the one, especially at the beginning of this book, to possibly have the most interesting arc. We'll see if the book can actually follow through with that, if the interesting character path that I see Catherine going on is actually fulfilled. But thus far, she is my favorite character to read about. So I kind of realized that there might be some of you that know nothing about this series. And I did do a review video on this over a year ago about 3 Dark Crowns, so you can go check that out if you want more details or my thoughts on that particular book. But it is this isolated island that every generation a queen births triplets. Those triplets are separated into different factions on this island, and they all have different powers. Once they become of age, they have to fight each other to the death. Whoever wins, last one standing, gets to become queen of the island, and the cycle starts all over again. The different powers along with these different factions include the naturalists, where you get an animal companion, kind of golden compass style. Elementals, can't control the elements. Final faction, which is so interesting, and I like that in the book. This is currently the most powerful faction is the poisoners, where you can withstand and ingest any poison of any amount. It does not bother you at all. But this is the second book, and in the first book there was a lot of twists and turns in that regard, and who has each power, and just that things may not be as they seem. And we bounce back and forth between these different settings and these different sisters, and all these sisters have different friends and caretakers who have their own agendas. It is actually pretty interesting. I think I enjoy this series a lot. I'm definitely enjoying the second book quite a bit, but we'll see if it can deliver on the premise later on. Okay, so the account that is putting on this magical readathon, her channel name being Book Roast, that's also her Instagram handle. She also threw up some book related / Harry Potter related photo prompts, book photo prompts for Instagram. And I love me a good photo prompt because while I enjoy Instagram immensely, I wouldn't say that I am a top-notch photographer by any means. So having a prompt, having a theme, or just something that you specifically should have in your photo helps me out a lot. So for April 6th, the prompt is currently studying, aka currently reading. And I already threw up a picture for The Slow Regard of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss before I started the magical readathon, actually. So I'm doing the other book I'm reading, being One Dark Throne. And I threw it in my little terrarium. Let me show you. See? Just threw it in. Now this particular prompt was not that difficult for me to figure out because I mean it's just what you're currently reading, and I happen to have an environment that vibes with the content of the book, and therefore especially once it's edited I think will turn into a pretty decently cool photo. Some of these other prompts, though not particularly difficult, I think I might struggle with a little bit more, like Taming a Fantastic Beast, bigger book on your magical TBR, time turner, book you'd love to read time and time again. I don't have a particularly thick book for April's TBR list. I did that on purpose. Or like a book that I love to read time and time again. I'm not sure that I even own my favorite book, crazy enough. I've only recently been at a point financially where I can start buying books the way that I've been able to the last year rather than just renting them from the library. I think that's one of the major difficulties of being involved in the book community is I don't have an enormous book collection, and I'm not sure I want to. I don't want to hoard or keep anything around that I'm not interested in, or that I'm definitely never going to read again, or is not in good condition, or that I know other people will enjoy more. But sometimes I feel that I should hang on to them because it fills out my bookshelf in the background, or if I need them for photos for Bookstagram, or it's like a very quick visual representation of, hey, I read a lot. But anywho, I need to edit this photo and get it up on Instagram. Hey everyone, it is Wednesday and I wanted to take this moment to talk about the books that I've been reading and my general thoughts on them. Sorry if you hear puppy noises in the background. So I don't think it will be any surprise that I am very steadily making my way through One Dark Throne. In fact, I am having trouble resisting the urge to constantly read this and then never pick up The Slow Regard of Silent Things. It's a character study, but it's not a plot-oriented book. So I try to read just even a few pages per night, and sometimes I get sucked into it. But One Dark Throne and this whole Three Dark Crown trilogy I find to be extremely interesting. To me, it actually very, very vaguely reminds me of, more in spirit than in content, but Game of Thrones, in the sense that there's just a really big cast of characters, they're in a bunch of different locations, and there's a lot of political drama and intrigue. And that is something that I think is lacking in a lot of YA, particularly YA fantasy, is that they are so close to one or two characters, it's very emotional and intense, and you're just with them all the time and locked in their heads and their feelings, but there's a maturity and an intrigue, but also a slight distance with this book that does feel very particular and very unique to this author and her writing style, especially when being in the young adult category. And we'll see how I feel about it once I get to the end. I still have plenty of book to go through, but there is a level of sophistication here that is really, really refreshing. But now let's talk about the audiobook that I meant to bring up in a previous clip and didn't. So I only have like 2 hours left to Morning Star, which is the third book in the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. Red Rising is a wildly successful sci-fi fantasy, new adult series, and I totally get it. I've gotten a friend and my mom onto the series, and both of them liked it immediately because there is a level of craftsmanship and it's creative. The writing is spectacular. As of right now, I still highly recommend this series to everyone. I do, however, only have 2 hours left, and I am very nervous that it is going to be very bleak. And this series is so ridiculously well done thus far that even if the ending turns out to be really, really hopelessly dark, that the journey is still worth it. This is how I felt about the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, where, not to spoil anything, but the ending is really dark, and I was left mildly unsatisfied by it, but still recommend the series to everybody because it's so good. I'm definitely nervous about finishing it. I'm so scared it's gonna go in a direction I don't want it to go in. That's not even to say that the super dark, bleak, depressing direction is wrong. It's just not my favorite. I'm just gonna unabashedly say that not necessarily the conclusion of every individual book, but for a conclusion of a series, especially an epic series, I like happy endings, or at the bare minimum a bittersweet sort of ending where maybe the main character that we're following doesn't get what they want, but the world as a whole is on the up and up. I just don't even know what to expect. Hello reading friends, it is Friday and look how close I am to finishing One Dark Throne. I typically don't read this fast, but I also have a lot more time on my hands than I do generally, and this book is just super engaging. I'm having such a great time. There was a point that was so genuinely creepy and mildly terrifying, and I was so uncomfortable and I had chills and a little bit panicked. It was so awesome. There's like a slight element of horror, specifically in this book, not that much in Three Dark Crowns, but in this sequel, that horror element is my favorite part of the book. It is definitely what is drawing me in the most and pushing me forward. On a bit of a negative note, the magic system in here is such a freaking wreck. I honestly wish that either the magic was extremely minimal, and I know the whole point is that these sisters in different parts of the island have different magical specialties, and I wish that maybe those specialties were a lot more subdued, or honestly, that they didn't exist at all. It's definitely the weakest part of the story. It's what people who don't like fantasy complain about fantasy. These magical elements have no rules and they come out of nowhere and they're just contrived and convenient. And I feel that so hard in this book. Luckily, it's not taking away my enjoyment of the story. There are other things in it like the horror factor, the character, the political backstabbing intrigue that is so much stronger, but whew. Also, I didn't film an update yesterday, so I didn't get to tell you guys, but I finished the audiobook to Morning Star. I'm officially done with that trilogy, and thank God it ended up being so cool. And I'm trying not to give anything away. It ended in a way that I'm superbly happy and satisfied with, which is kind of all I can ask for in such a ginormous and expertly crafted series. I would highly recommend Red Rising to anybody, even if sci-fi is not your favorite genre. It's not exactly my favorite genre, and it's also written in first person, which is not my favorite perspective to read from. But Pierce Brown is such an incredibly talented and thorough author, and this story is so awesome. I loved reading it in print, and I also loved the audiobooks. I think the audiobook actor is superbly talented. The next audiobook that I'm gonna read that I am so excited for, I'll probably start listening to it either later tonight or tomorrow. By the way, none of these audiobooks are counting towards my magical readathon. I want to keep that specifically to actual books and actual reading. But the next one I'm going to read is The House of Earth and Blood, which is the first book in the Crescent Moon series, I believe. But anyway, it's Sarah J. Maas's new adult fantasy, not YA fantasy. Granted, her YA fantasy was pretty adult, but I am super excited. I've heard, honestly, some mixed things, especially when listening to it over audio. I have pretty consistently and pretty thoroughly enjoyed Sarah J. Maas. Her stuff is just so wild and unpredictable and out there. She takes a lot of risks. It's insanely creative. Generally just has like a good, fun vibe about her work. It will just be a really good escapism, especially during quarantine. But because I have been so into One Dark Throne, I have not been reading Patrick Rothfuss's short story at night, but I will once I'm done with this book. I'm just too into the story right now, and I knew this would happen too with that book in particular, which is why, despite the fact that it's so short, I need the entire month to get through it, especially if I'm reading it for my night class. And once I'm done with One Dark Throne, oh my gosh, I just realized I'm gonna be doing another Sarah J. Maas book. I did not plan this at all, but I'm gonna be reading A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is my heart ruin pick, because even though it doesn't have a heart on the title or on the cover, but it's my only romance, and so that's what I'm gonna read, and it seems fairly short, and I like those characters, so hopefully it will be fairly enjoyable. But that's going to be it for this week's reading update for the Magical Readathon. Let me know if you two are partaking in the OWLs this year, and what you're studying, and what books you're reading, and if you've read any of the books that I am currently on or have finished. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!